everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Wednesday, and we had some snow over a good chunk of the Northeast for overnight last night and this morning. The system was kind of slow to pull out of the way. Coastal areas didn't get very much. At the very end, it changed back to some snow, and some places had the ground whitened up, maybe a little bit of a slushy accumulation, but just inland there were some decent amounts, 4 to 7 inches in some places. And the main center of activity at the moment is with a second weather system, and I'm going to show you on the radar, the regional radar. And we've got snow. You can see the snow with the first system right now is producing snow across coastal Maine and back through southeastern New Hampshire, but it's pretty much done everywhere else. Now here's a second low with the snow from the Delmarva Peninsula throughout much of southeastern Virginia and a good chunk of central and eastern North Carolina. There are some 4 to 8 inch snows that are going to accumulate in this zone here just to the south. Now, normally we would be getting alarm bells going off with a system this close, but this is actually a system that's pulling away to the east and not lifting up to the northeast. So that's good news, at least from our standpoint, that we're not going to have another round of snow to deal with. And now, of course, with all the moisture that's standing around, we are seeing some icing problems tonight. But I just want to show you the watches and warnings that we have at the moment. And it's getting, it's starting to quiet down a bit. We do have a large area from East Texas into Florida, not just the Panhandle, but even extending down further south to almost the Tampa-St. Pete area, where we have a hard freeze watch up for this area, hard freeze warning. Temperatures this morning across parts of central and northern Mississippi and northern Alabama were down in the single digits. I have a sister who lives in Tupelo, and she bottomed out in Tupelo, Mississippi at 6 above. A number of the roadways in Louisiana, southeast Louisiana along I-10 all closed from the light sleet and snow. Now, if you're in from the Northeast or from the Great Lakes or the Midwest or anywhere that there's snow is a regular occurrence, you look at it, and somebody pointed out on one of the pictures I saw, they said, well, in New Jersey we call this a coating, and yeah, and the thing is, across the South, for those of you who don't know, a lot of these southern roads, you're not allowed to have snow tires. So you just don't get events like this. So there's no reason to have them to begin with. But even snow tires aren't going to help you when it comes to ice. So the driving experience across this part of the nation, as far as winter weather is concerned, it's absolutely minimal. Even the northerners that have moved down to the south, they kind of shake their heads at all of this because they're savvy, but yeah, you folks down south don't get this opportunity to have to deal with this stuff too long. It's hard. I'm not blaming you for anything here, but it's got to be tough when you have a weather element that you're not used to. Winter storm warnings are up throughout much of eastern North Carolina, even out in the Outer Banks. I think they did put up a winter storm warning. Let me just double check on that. Because I thought I did see it. Actually, the coastal counties from Morehead City northeast to Columbia out to Nags Head, indeed, with a winter storm warning in effect. I'm just kind of curious. I'm going to punch up one of the forecasts. Just kind of curious as to what they're talking about. 2 to 4 inch amount. So the Outer Banks are getting a rare snowfall indeed. Doesn't happen that often. And we've got some various winter weather watches now going up across in the west, across parts of Nevada and in through California. Looks like a little stripe there of winter storm warnings up. Weather activity as a whole is going to be shifting now to the west. The East Coast has been dealing with this stuff in the deep south, but now I think what we're going to see happen is the overall storm track is going to start moving systems up toward the Great Lakes. We mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, and on and off as we've been looking at this pattern kind of evolving as we go forward, that models, have been trying to make lows, deep lows going to the Great Lakes from time to time, and in fact, they've been trying to show, rather intense lows. But up until now, we've been kind of saying, well, until it really starts happening, we're going to be really suspect. But given the fact that the whole upper trough across the United States is changing, the whole pattern of the jet stream changing, that if we start seeing some lows running to the Great Lakes, it wouldn't be a surprise. So here's the first one. The cold air in the east will be pulling out over the next 2 days. So we're going to start a nice warm-up going into the weekend. We're going to see some 50-degree readings here in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area. Here's a low that comes out of the northwest and drops down into western Kansas, and you can see snows breaking out here Saturday into Sunday across Wyoming, Colorado, down into New Mexico, and on up through the Dakotas, and a little streak of moisture over into Minnesota. This could wind up being a halfway decent snow event for eastern Nebraska on up into eastern South Dakota through Minnesota. Hard to say with respect to Wisconsin because of the track of the low. Looks like it's going to be cutting the state across the northwestern part of the state, so that might limit the snowfall there, but there's a fair amount of snows going on behind this as we move into next week. In the east, it's rain, some rain showers with an approaching cold front late Monday into Tuesday, and then behind that low, it does turn a bit colder. But again, with the trough shifting now into the west, we do have another weather system coming in to the Pacific Northwest. One thing to point out, though, there is going to be a little renegade upper air trough dropping down from Canada along about the middle of next week. Models have been kind of showing this for a few days. It looks like it wants to take, the GFS anyway, wants to take some kind of low out off the southeast coast. But if this shot of cold air materializes, it'll probably only last for a day or two before that pulls out. And then we have another low that the model, as we go deeper into the long range, now we're into day 10 here, we start to see low pressure developing down in the Gulf states, but that runs up also up to the west. Whether there's any kind of blocking in the atmosphere in the longer range pattern, I don't know. Models have been hinting at that over the last few days. That might change things with regards to how warm it does get. I tend to think that the warm-up that we might see will be rather uneven in nature and not necessarily what we would refer to as a blowtorch. Yeah, there might be the odd day here and there, but I'm not sure. I don't think we're going to see, long stretches of temperatures in the 50s and 60s. Unless there's the odd day here and there. I'm not seeing that, but we certainly are going to be running with above normal temperatures in the eastern part of the United States. Now, I'll bring up the upper air and the jet stream. And here's our system for today, and you can see how it just kind of lifts out. Then we get into a bit of a ridge here in the east. You can see the trough in the west kicks eastward into the Rockies, and then starts to lift northeastward toward the Great Lakes. So that sort of makes sense. Here's a bit of a cold flow later next week. You see that sort of weak trough that runs from the northern lakes down into the Gulf states. It doesn't look all that impressive, then kind of moves along, and then once that goes by, another ridge tries to build. Another trough rotates down out of Canada, but the main troughing is out in the west. After day 11 and 12, certainly showing a deep trough out there in the western part of the United States with a strong ridge here in the east. Again, after the 10th day, who knows how real it is in terms of the specifics, but it does, we've been in this wintry weather pattern across the eastern two-thirds of the United States pretty much for the last 6 weeks, and particularly the last 4 weeks, where in the east we've seen the really, really cold air. That's about as long as a pattern usually lasts. So to see that it's breaking down is not a huge surprise here. And if it breaks down, it might break down for a 2 or 3 week stretch. And I still think we're going to reload into something as we move into the month of February. Meanwhile, we have a deep trough into most of Europe for the rest of this week, but then we're going to have a ridge building over the weekend and into next week. with the storming that's out in the Atlantic in the longer term, we had some cold weather. Here's the surface map here. You can see the isobars coming in just from South Greenland. That's cold air, bringing waves of snow into Ireland, the western shores of Ireland and Great Britain, kind of like the lake effect stuff. And then after that, when that ridge starts to come in, you start to get these storms off the Atlantic moving to the west, and that brings up relatively milder air, so that kind of cuts off the snow possibilities after we get through this coming weekend and the early part of next week. So cold shot goes away. As far as southeastern Canada is concerned, no major storms on the horizon there over the next 10 days, as the weather is fairly quiet. Cold but quiet. Now, I'm going to bring myself back up here on full screen. As usual with these, when these storms are done, I get, I kind of get a little bit brain fried. I think that's where I am at the moment. But let's get into the conversation here. So a big hello to everybody. David Schwartz, that NAO staying positive for most of the, for the most part, slight negative around January 25th, 27th. PNA stays negative, WPO negative, EPO positive. Yeah, that's not the best signature that you want to see with respect to, cold weather. But you know what? Again, we've been in this for 4 weeks. I would not be at all surprised if 4 to 6 weeks. So if we get a 2 to 3 week break out of this pattern, that's not a big deal. In fact, let me just bring up the teleconnections here for you. And give me 1 second here, folks. And you can see what David is talking about here. Bring it up to the top. So we're looking at that NAO staying basically positive for the most part until we get into that January 20, at least from the ensembles, it looks like the 23rd to the 25th or 6th. And it's not strongly positive, though. So, that, you got to kind of watch that. PNA goes deeply negative in the next 3 or 4 days and then starts a rise up toward neutral, but not quite there in the next 2 weeks. You've got the EPO slightly positive throughout the next 2 weeks. So the signature, again, is not like how it was when we had the PNA positive and the strong negative, the strong negative EPO. So that was what it was like for a good chunk of the last 4 weeks. So that's not the case right now, and not the case going forward, but not unusual. Okay, nothing that I'm seeing here is anything that's unusual. Patricia Petrilak, 8 to 9 inches in Larksville, Pennsylvania, 3 inches in Matthews, North Carolina. I've talked to a few people down in the Raleigh-Durham area where they've gotten about 4 or 5 inches so far. Garo Vestas, January 26th to 28th, skiing up in New York State Catskills, Wyndham, with a bunch of fines supposed to go down into the teens. I guess that's friends going into the teens up there, and get 1 to 3 inches Friday night. We'll see. Yeah, the Catskills on up through upstate New York and New England. Ski conditions have been great this season, and I don't see any change in that. My buddy Phil Bazanka is on. Good to see you, pal. Always good to see you on board. That's who I refer to as meteorologist Phil Buzz, my all-shore correspondent on Long Island, and he was doing a couple of videos for Facebook, and he's getting used to doing the camera stuff, which is great. Let's see. James Hines, the Weather Network is predicting that it's going to be mild right through the first week of February, and then beyond that it's going to be frigid in Central and Eastern North America. Well, one of the things that's going on, James, is the fact that there seems to be another big stratospheric warming going on, much like what we saw in November, and there's usually a 2 to 3 week lag. So if it plays out the same way, then maybe we might be going into a colder than normal pattern once we get through, say, the first week or 10 days of February. But you know what? I don't know at this point. I really don't. You don't. You can only guess at these things. It does seem like it should happen again, but I'm just kind of, I'm much more short-term focused. Not really, as I've said many times, it's hard for me to kind of get my head around the long range. So I'll leave that up to those long range guys. Reaver 501, the morning guy on channel 11 is saying 60 this weekend, overdone. You know what, Reaver, that might be pushing it. I suppose it's not impossible that it could get well into the 50s in some places, but I'm thinking the wind direction might be a problem in some places, especially because of the cold ocean. You know, there will be a sea breeze along, you know, south-facing shores for sure. Let me just take a quick look here. You know, it's not like we have this humongous ridge in the eastern part of the United States. So let me just take a look. I just want to see what some of these models are forecasting. I mean, you know, I kind of doubt it. I really do. It's so cold all the way, the whole eastern part of the United States. It's so bitterly cold across the south. I mean, to warm it up to 60 like that here is going to be tough. It really is, especially because you have, you know, the wind is going to be from the west, which normally is a pretty good wind to work with in terms of warming, but at least initially anyway. But I'm not seeing 60 this weekend. I really think that's a tough sell for me. In fact, I just kind of want to look at the, you know, the winds. You know, you've got basically a west wind here, a west-northwest wind Saturday into Sunday. I mean, that northwest wind is coming off a snow cover, so it's hard for me to imagine that we're going to be able to warm up that much. And then on Sunday and into Monday, we're going to turn the wind. The wind is going to become more southerly, and that is going to be tough to warm things up as well, because then you're going to be dealing with clouds and a wind off the ocean. So I will beg to differ on that particular idea of a forecast. Let's see a few more questions. I'm going to kind of cut it short a little bit tonight, folks. I'm a little bit tired. Steve Franco, good to see you here as always. The winter returns in February. It probably will. Maybe after the first week of February. You're going to have to give time for this pattern to reload, and usually it's 2 to 3 weeks. I got to tell you, if you think back to, you know, looking back and remembering the winter of 95, 96, there was a 3-week break that occurred in the overall weather pattern from mid-January into the first week of February, and then the pattern came right back in, roaring back for the second half that brought snows right into the month of April, through the middle of April. Had one of the bigger snowstorms on Long Island, was a 16-inch snowfall in mid-April that I missed on. I was out on vacation, but we had 16 inches of heavy wet snow at my house, and it was described by a lot of people were telling me that it was far worse to get around with that than it was in the blizzard of 96, because the snow was very, very heavy and very, very wet, and it all fell at night, and there were pancake-sized flakes, as it was described. Backdoor fronts are always an issue, and I think that's something we'll have to look at. I don't think we're going to have that problem Saturday. Don't really see it on Sunday, more so the fact that the wind is going to gradually go around to the south. And the colder air, Jake asking for the west, is going to shift to the west, but I don't know that it's going to be like what we've, you know, the extreme that we saw in the east. But going to be interesting. You know, I find this winter so far has been quite fascinating. We've had the blizzard. We've had a bunch of nickel and dime events that I've been going through here in my neck of the woods here in the Northeast. So you know, it's been pretty decent for a winter weather lover. Which, by the way, I admittedly am becoming less of, because as I'm getting older, the cold air, the snow's not a big bother for me, but the cold air is getting a bit hard to take. Could we have severe weather when the warm air comes? You know what? I'm going to have to give that a better look over the next couple of days. I really haven't been paying too much attention. This Great Lakes system might trigger off some, possibly could trigger off some thunderstorms with the cold front ahead of it. But let me give it a better look as we go forward. And let the pattern reload. We always get 2 major storms, and I expect another around Valentine's Day. All right, well, we're going to write that date down, Reaver 501, and see if your prediction comes true. Yeah, Garrow, you're correct. 50s this weekend, then there's going to be another cold intrusion, then another warm-up that follows. So very uneven. I don't really know too much about Byron Miranda, so I can't really answer the question with regards to his bio. I do fill in on WPIX Channel 11 from time to time, but that's just it. I'm only there from time to time. I really don't interact with most of the people that work there on the air during the week. Iron Mine 10, have I ever done storm chasing in Kansas or Oklahoma? I have not. I don't know that I want to, okay? It's not my cup of tea. I know some guys are really into that. Some guys and gals are really into that sort of thing. Not my cup of tea. I'd rather be in a safe place. I've been and seen too much over the years. I don't want to. I don't really have a big interest in getting into a vehicle and chasing a storm. Let me just get the last of your comments. Like I said, he is a meteorologist. Okay, Dio. I met him once very briefly, so like I said, I don't really know too much about it. Okay, so let's leave it at that. We are going to move on forward here. And no, I do not skydive. Okay, and never will. So let's leave it here at this point. I may take a break for a day, maybe tomorrow. I'll see how I feel. But sometimes after, when I get these big weather events that go on, I am, like I said, I get a bit burned out between everything we were doing on air, off air, Facebook, and so on. Kind of need a little bit of a timeout. So I will do the 9:15 Joe Rayo Joe Cioffi show, the Joe and Joe show, on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi, at 9:15 tonight, and so you might want to tune in. And then either tomorrow or Friday or Saturday. I've been using Saturday as a good day not to do a YouTube live. So if weather conditions permit and we don't have anything threatening anywhere, I might take that break on Saturday. But if not, I may do it tomorrow. I'll just watch the. I'm getting winded here. Watch the schedule, the scheduled time on the YouTube channel to see if I'm going to do something tomorrow or Friday. And sometimes I say this sort of stuff and then I wind up doing it anyway. All right, folks, have a great rest of your evening and a great Thursday coming up. We'll see you tonight at 9:15 on Facebook, and maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday. We'll see.